Welcome to the Intrinsic First Leadership Podcast. I'm Aaron Robbins with Intrinsic First. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Be sure to stick around to the end for some debatably funny jokes that will hopefully leave you with a smile. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes. We're here to support you, and we'd love to hear from you. So drop us a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. Ready to dive into the world of leadership? Let's get started. I'd like to introduce Dr. Drea Zigarmi and Mr. Jimmy Karam. I'm Aaron Robbins, and we're here to talk to you about leadership. We like to think we're experts sometimes.
Very, very few times.
Yeah, but, we all fail as much as we succeed.
Yes.
So the topic today is going to be about just leadership in general. What is leadership? And the model and theory, I guess,
Well, we can talk a little bit about the forms of leadership and the contexts under which we might act.
So why don't we start with a definition of leadership?
Oh, well, I tell you what I like as a provocative introduction. I'd like the audience to think about the idea that leadership is not a noun, but a verb. And of course, what I mean by that is leadership is action. It's not a thing. It's not something you have. It's something you do. And it's connected to relevant outcomes that you want to get. So I often wish that we would not think of it as something it. It's an it. It isn't. It's a set of actions done, either well or not so well, appropriately or inappropriately. What do you think about that?
No, I like that because it kind of puts it in your box to do something with it. It's not something you're given.
Yeah, and it's not something that's permanent.
Right.
It's not something you own. It's something you do constantly on a repetitive. It's repetitive action, right. Actually.
It's a skill. Right?
Yeah.
Something you practice. Everyone needs
you
to practice.
can learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you weren't born. Leaders aren't born.
Yeah.
They're developed.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, there are some people I think they believe that leaders are born. Would you say that there's a combination of this development and some innate qualities that need to exist, or?
Yeah, it makes it easy because some people ask me, they'll say, are leaders born or are they made?
Right.
And I just say yes. And if they don't get it, I don't want to be there.
I've had people ask me that question, and then they ask for like a percentage, like, well, how much of it do they have to, how much of it do they need to learn? Or do they
32.7%.
Yeah, it's like 80-20, 60-40, it's like.
No, isn't something around 30% of your genetic traits drive, your personality, and then the other 70% approximately is
environmentally determined.
Disposition, environmental, learned.
Yeah. So the research on reared apart twins, zygotic twins from the same egg, how parallel are they, or how similar are they? And it turns out that it's probably about 30%. They're similar. They have same tendencies. And the other part of it's environmentally driven. So if they're reared apart, even though there's some genetic overplay, they really are quite different, 66%, so to speak. And of course, that's just what we're really talking about is when you test two people on a personality test, there are some similarities between those people. If they were zygotic twins.
Right, and even if they don't live together, They could have grown up in
different
completely separate
environments.
families, different states, countries.
So Amazing Race just had an episode where they had two twins that they didn't know each other growing up, and they got them together to run the Amazing Race, and you could see the differences, but then you also can see the similarities, which is really cool.
Yeah,
because they didn't grow up together, but yet they had these similarities, and that kind of goes to what you were saying.
Yeah. So people really are individually molded by their environment.
Yeah.
More so than they are by their genetics.
And I think that's where the focus should be on, like, what can I do to improve my leadership skills, right? You focus on the part you have no control over, your personality, or you just focus on what you can learn and what you can take action on. So going back to your original definition of being a verb, I like that. It puts the power in our hands to improve.
Yeah.
Proactivity.
Yeah.
So that reminds me, in school this past week, I guess over the last couple of weeks, so my research methods class, we're talking about research methods, and professor gave an example. He does work for the Gates Foundation, and the Gates Foundation asked him to look at the growth versus fixed mindset, Carol Dweck's stuff, and we're putting that podcast out and about to bash on Carol Dweck stuff, and I love it. I believe in it, and I think there's a lot there that can help people. But the interesting thing was he went back and did a whole review of all the studies because the Gates Foundation wanted to know, should we go spend like millions of dollars and roll this out as a campaign to teach people about fixed versus growth mindset? And what it turns out is most of the experimentation, the methods of the experimentation was not really all that strong or valid. So, for example, they would do a pre-post without a control group of a class of third graders, measure their learning over the year, and they found that over the year, all the students learned. Right? Well, of course they did. They're great students in school.
Well, if you're banging their heads against the wall, they probably want to just stop.
Right. So without the control group, which I guess there was minimal studies done with the control group, you can't know whether the growth mindset
was greater or
was actually improving their skill set, or did they just improve because they were going to class?
But can you say more about what you mean by a growth mindset?
Sure. So Carol Dweck talks about growth mindset. She's saying that it's a paradigm, a way you perceive the world and your experiences as something that you have control over, that you can work and put in effort and improve, as opposed to a fixed mindset where you feel I'm a certain amount of smart. That's as good as I'm going to get. I can't go more than that. It doesn't matter how much I practice.
Either you got it or you don't.
Right. And so it leads to...
You recognize that, did you?
Yeah. It leads to the difference between outcome goals versus performance goals, right? So typically with a growth mindset, you're going to look at learning or performance goals to set your goals in a way that I want to learn or get better at something, as opposed to, I just want to complete this task.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it can, change the perspective of people, right? So it all rolls into the concept of proactivity, I think.
Well, there was a period in the literature of leadership where personality was considered to be the key to getting to better leadership.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing, because what happened was that as they began to try to correlate certain personality traits like extroversion, there was no correlations between those who were extroverted or introverted and the performance levels of the, let's say, the measures of leadership that they were using. So in certain ways, personality theory only led to us moving away from that to a more important way of looking at leadership, which is behavior. That's why I keep saying leadership is a set of behaviors, given or done in a certain way.
Yeah. No, that shift happened kind of around the 70s, I think, right? Is when
actually that behavior started right after the Second World War.
Oh.
The Second World War had a huge impact on personality theory in general, because the Stanford Binet instrument, or the idea of IQ, was just begun to be perfected by the authors, and it came into use to try to get better leaders or try to get better performance from people. unfortunately, while you would think that IQ is in some way correlated to being a good leader, it's not necessarily true in all circumstances, nor did it show up over a large group of people in a sample. So the concept of personality or traits, they called it research, gave way about 1948 to behavior. And that's really where leadership started to become empirically measured and used in experiments about, well, what is good leadership?
I always looked at like IQ as like a threshold. Like you only need whatever that bar is, depending on what the activity you're measuring. If you have enough of IQ, you've met the bar. Now there's other things you got to do to become a good leader. So like I always felt like IQ just kind of gave you a measure. Like, do you have a certain, whatever the minimum is required? And so I think, you get to this, this idea that you got to learn leadership, you got to develop it, you have a skill to practice it. Do you think there's still like a minimum IQ that's required to be a good leader? I mean,
yes, my son.
I know the answer.
Give it up.
Do I have what it takes? Can I get there? Is there hope for me?
Oh, yes.
I don't know if that's a fixed mindset or not.
But it deserves some consideration.
You're saying there's a chance.
Yes. You're saying there's a chance. Oh, God help me. Well, it is there. I have been studying some of the questions that are related to intelligence, and of course, intellectual intelligence is one form, but there are 7 different given forms of intelligence, as posed by Howard Gardner of Harvard fame, so to speak, in which he said there was visual spatial intelligence, which would be somebody like Picasso.
That's why Jimmy's not good at sports.
Have we established that yet?
No.
Okay.
He's probably the best at sports.
I always keep calling him a sport, but I didn't know that was what it was. Well, sport. Well, I'm going to lose it here.
Is emotional intelligence one of them as well?
Yeah. Emotional intelligence is where we're going to know. Yeah. And we did a study in 2015 where we took 100 managers and we asked them to take an IQ, an emotional intelligence test. And so they have their perceptions of somewhere along the high IQ, low IQ. And then we asked their direct reports, what behaviors did they use or what did they experience from that leader? And what we found was that the supportive behaviors, of course, were expressed or seen more frequently used by the direct reports with high emotionally intelligent managers. Mm-hmm. And so if they saw themselves as highly emotionally intelligent, they were using those behaviors to do things that other managers won't do. And of course, there was a marvelous psychologist by the name of Ket de Vries. He's a Belgian clinical psychologist, and he coined a term called alexithymia. And alexithymia is the absence of any emotional expression in the form in their behaviors. And so alexithymia is of course then detrimentally it's detrimentally considered to inhibit really good leadership behaviors, or better yet, more expressive, more friendly, supportive behaviors, which is 1/2 of the 50% of leader behaviors that were used and investigated between, say, in 1950 and 1970, which was the behavioral period of the leadership literature. So they listen better. They have empathy. They express feelings better. their own feelings as well as the feelings of the people that they're having an interaction with. So there is a certain advantage to emotional intelligence in the form of our actions of leaders, and it does increase productivity.
And it can be taught. I think that's the big thing. Like IQ is like your IQ, right? But then EQ is something that you can actually improve upon.
Well, it's turned out that IQ is also learned and can be increased.
Well, there's hope then for me. I feel good.
Oh, darn it. Well, see, everything is taken in terms of self when it comes to being emotionally inhibited.
Well, I asked a question because in sports terms, then, to be a basketball player, an NBA basketball player, you have to be a certain height. Like if I'm 5'8", my odds of becoming an NBA player is very, very slim. There is a chance, but very slim. If I'm 7 feet tall, then my chance dramatically improve. But I have no control over like whether I'm going to be 7 feet tall or 6 feet tall. I can drink more milk when I'm younger, but that only gives me so much. So that's kind of why I asked that question. Does it translate to leadership in that regard as well, or in learning?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's only helpful if the behaviors that you have abundance of is needed in a certain context. If it's not, you can have that abundance of height, but it doesn't correlate to performance. That makes sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So depending on what you bring to the table will determine how much more you need to work at a certain skill or a certain behavior.
Or will define some limits.
Sure.
And that you either have to overcome or you have to admit and sort of let go of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because we hear about these famous leaders or who have like dyslexia, and they have to overcome that dyslexia, so they have to work 3 times as hard as someone who doesn't have dyslexia to do certain tasks.
Yes.
So I guess part of it is knowing yourself and what you bring to the table, and
well, then you'd have to go at it. I have a grandchild who has dyslexia, and she didn't know she did. In fact, we didn't even learn it till she was 10. And the reason for it was that she had such a phenomenal memory that once she read something or heard somebody read it, she could repeat it and write it verbatim. Like you swear she was reading it from the book when she wasn't reading it. She was just paraphrasing it back. And it wasn't even paraphrasing. It was exactly the words that were being said or used in the book. So she kind of faked her way into the 3rd grade and the 4th grade, and then she began to realize it was a limit, and people began to see it. Luckily, because they're picking it up in schools now, and they're diagnosing for it, and so she decided she was going to change that, and she really has now. She's reading 2 grades above the level that she at one point couldn't do. So that kind of stuff is really what you're talking about. You want kids to do or people to do.
Yeah. I think about it in terms of leadership, again, you have certain people that just are better at doing certain tasks than others, or empathizing or not. So,
but only if empathizing is needed in the circumstance in which,
right.
Yeah,
I get you. That's awesome.
But I wonder, like you think of Anders Ericsson, where he talks about deliberate practice and the amount of time somebody spends practicing and learning something, they get better. But I wonder where, even as just a little kid, there's certain skills that associate with leadership, like, communication and persuasion, inspiration, things like that, that if you have certain traits, even though that's only 30% of, what really makes up your personality, because you also have values, you have disposition. But if at an early age, those traits are driving what you do and what you focus on, you end up spending way more time essentially practicing or doing things that align with leadership skills, that by the time you get into leadership roles, even in, I think, childhood and then early adulthood, you're going to have a huge edge, which may even seem like trait, but it's traits that drove, the skills or the environment. And now you're, heads and tails ahead. So then you wonder, well, traits only drives 30%, but what does that mean in terms of how you get started and where you go and how you build those skills?
I agree. Let's talk a little bit. I would like to get at this. And I hope that the people that are listening to and getting anything from what they're listening to with us.
You mean the person?
What did I say?
You said people. I don't know if more than one person's going to be listening.
Oh, he's playing that game. Where's that button? I want to push that button for me.
So it's 2023. This is probably 2027.
Yeah,
now people are coming back and they're listening.
Here we go.
Listen,
All right.
you know a person,
Ladies
you know a
and
person, I
germs.
know a person. We got three people.
It'll be people.
Don't mind him, please.
Yeah. Is it time for a dad joke yet? Right? Didn't we say every 15 minutes?
Oh, yeah. Well, you go ahead.
Now we're on the spot.
No.
You don't have a
Well,
dad?
I mean, you know how you can tell a dad joke from other jokes, right? Because it's apparent. There we go.
Okay. So let me see what I was going to say. It's important, I think. We use certain words like listening or problem solving.
Yep.
Or feedback. Those words should have meanings. Oftentimes they're just words that everybody takes for granted that they understand. And what I'd really like us to do, and I'd like our audience to know, is that those behaviors need to be defined a little bit more clearly. So listening is really composed of maybe 3 or 4 very important sub-elements, fundamentals that as we go into the number of times we do this and talk about it, let's just put those words out there. So listening, for example, is made up of paraphrasing, telling somebody or giving back what this person said verbatim, so that there's a parallel between what they heard from the person and did the person understand that they heard it. So paraphrasing is one. Another one is summarizing. Okay, after a while, we might want to summarize what we touched on today or in the past, and come back to it in a general form that would allow people to really remember. Oh yeah, I remember them. So paraphrasing is a second. And another is reflecting feelings that you heard that person saying. So Jimmy, I heard you were a little sad about that, or Drea, I heard that you were a little anxious about that. And check it out by saying, is that a fair statement of what I'm saying about what you're doing or how I saw it? So another one is reflecting feelings. And that's fourth one is that the nonverbal behaviors that are being demonstrated by you, the listener, are clearly signals that you are focusing on what they are. So you're not looking past them. See, if you're looking for the bad example each time in these podcasts, look over here to the left over here. You know, it's this guy. Okay, anyway. So having nonverbals that are commensurate and compatible with the idea of focus on them, not somebody else. You're not shuffling papers on and checking your watch. Nothing like somebody saying to me, "Oh, well, I'm really serious about this. Could I tell you 10 minutes?"
Yeah, look at my Instagram.
Jimmy does that to me all the time. I forgot to tell him. Anyway. So as we go through the times that we're together and talking about skills, let's talk a little bit more specifically and break apart some of the words that are commonly used, like listening or problem solving or feedback, things like that, and help by being so specific that when somebody comes away from what they might find valuable that we have to say, they can.
No, I like that a lot because it goes back to what we're saying. These are skills that we can practice, that we can define and then practice and put some of that control in our own hands.
So,
and we missed the fifth one because everyone's wondering.
Active listening.
It was attending to nonverbals, reflecting feelings, paraphrasing, summarizing,
and asking open-ended questions.
Right. Asking
that was the
thoughtful, open-ended questions.
So tell me, before you go any further, do you have any? And you're really opening it up, drawing out more from what you're getting. Sort of like seeing when you get a kid, you're with a kid and the kid they did wrong. Why did you do that?
Yeah. But then it's also in asking those questions, it's pausing to
That's
hear the
not an
answer.
open-ended question. That's not an open-ended question. Why did I do that? I don't know why I did it.
Right,
I'm only
right.
11. Who
That's
knew? Sorry.
So, but, I mean, I love that because a lot of times we think we're doing those steps or we try to do those steps, but we don't pause for the actual, being comfortable in the silence. I guess.
What's that?
Comedian over here.
Oh, sorry. No more.
So this is where we plug the future podcast that we haven't even
Yes,
done yet
that's right.
on active listening.
I love that. Yeah.
And we hope you keep watching or listening. It's Sundays at 7, right? Is that when we release them? I don't know.
7? I hope he means it's
the
night.
7th at 7?
Who's up at 7 in the morning on Sundays?
No, he
PM.
doesn't get up before then.
Yes, PM. Yeah.
No.
Huh? You don't get up before 7 p.m.
My head doesn't.
You're always out partying until
Oh.
early weekend.
No, I like that,
hours of the
and
morning.
that's something we can definitely do.
No,
going
we
forward.
will. We'll have a podcast on active listening. We hope you listen to it.
Yeah.
Congrats! You made it to the end of the episode. Thanks for tuning in. We genuinely hope that you found value in our conversation. If you liked it, please click that like button below and subscribe so that you can stay up to date on our current episodes. And if you didn't like it, you can click the dislike button, but make sure you click it twice. We're eager to hear from you, whether it's your thoughts, questions, topic ideas, or if you're interested in our leadership training and consulting support. Leave us a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. We're open to any and all feedback. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you back for more insightful leadership discussion. Until next time,